Your resume, it's just a snapshot in time, right? A list of jobs you've had, degrees you've earned. But what if your professional value wasn't just a document? What if it was a live, breathing portfolio of your ability to solve real problems? Today, we're diving into Zrooth, a platform that's built on that very idea. And it asks a really interesting question about the future of work.
I mean, think about it for a second. We've all been there, haven't we? Trying to squeeze years of complex skills and real hands-on experience onto a single page. But does that PDF, that static document, really capture your ability to think on your feet, to innovate, to solve a problem from the ground up? Well, the whole idea behind Zrooth is that it just can't.
Okay, so before we jump into the solution, let's really break down the core problem Zrooth is trying to fix. And according to them, it's a pretty fundamental flaw in how the professional world connects talent with opportunity.
And this is where it gets pretty interesting. The argument is that the market is kind of broken, but on both sides. On one hand, you've got companies just struggling to find proven talent, and on the other, you have countless skilled people who have no real way to show what they can do. It really is like two sides of a canyon with no bridge connecting them.
This right here is the core critique of how things are now. The argument being made is that the biggest professional network out there has become more about self-promotion than it is about verifiable, actual proof of talent. Which, it just begs the question. If that's not the answer, then what is?
All right, so if the old model is broken, what's the alternative? Let's dive into the Zrooth solution, which is really built on a completely different way of thinking about how you prove your value.
So the heart of this whole thing is a concept they call the IBW. That stands for Insight, Blog, or White Paper. The idea is actually super simple but really powerful. Instead of just listing your skills on a resume, you prove them by creating a digital asset that actually solves a real industry problem. It basically becomes a living, dynamic resume that shows employers how you think, not just what you've done before. So how does this actually work in practice? What does it look like for a user? Well, it's basically a four-step process. First, you start by exploring real problems happening in an industry. Then, you do the research and develop your own original solution. After that, you publish your findings as one of those IBWs, building out your portfolio of work. And finally, you use that portfolio as your credential when you apply for projects. See, it's a huge shift from just passively looking for jobs to actively solving problems. Okay, but let's be real. This space is super crowded, right? So how is this model really any different from the big players we all already know? Let's take a look at the competitive advantage. In this table, this is where you can really see the fundamental difference in philosophy. LinkedIn relies on credentials and people endorsing you. Upwork is all about bidding on jobs and getting reviews. But Zrooth's validation is supposed to come from your published work, your actual tangible contributions. This completely changes the core activity. You're not just networking or bidding on gigs, you're actively researching and creating new knowledge. So the whole play here isn't to be just another LinkedIn or a slightly better Upwork. No, it's about carving out an entirely new lane that's all about merit. The idea is that there's this huge gap in the market for a platform where the quality of your ideas and your ability to actually execute on them is the only thing that matters. Okay, it's a cool idea for sure, but is it a big idea? What's the real opportunity here? Let's get into the numbers and the long-term vision they've laid out for Zrooth. First up, let's talk about students. You've got 20 million people in higher ed in the US alone. Think about that. This is a huge group of people who are digital natives, and they're often desperate for a tangible way to prove their skills that goes beyond a diploma, to bridge that gap into a real-world career. And then you've got the whole freelance economy. We're talking over 60 million professionals in the US. These are people who live and die by their portfolios and their proven work, which makes them a pretty natural fit for a platform that's built around contribution. So when you put those two huge markets together, Zrooth is aiming for 2.5 million users in 5 years. And to put that into perspective, that's less than 1.5% of the total US workforce. So yeah, it's ambitious, but it's framed as a totally achievable slice of a massive, massive pie. And of course, this translates into some pretty big financial projections. The model shows revenue climbing to almost $240 million by year 5. So how do they get there? Well, the strategy is basically to get a ton of users on board first with a cheap subscription and then layer on those more valuable corporate and university partnerships later. And it doesn't just stop there. The long-term vision is to build out this entire ecosystem. They're talking about things like a super smart AI matching system to connect your work directly to what companies need, and even a mentorship module to help you grow your skills and connect with experts in your field.
So, all of this brings us right back to where we started, back to that big question. And maybe it's a question for your own career. In a world where skills are changing faster than ever, could your portfolio of proven, tangible work, the stuff you actually create, one day be more valuable than your resume? It's a powerful idea, and it just might reshape the future of work for all of us.